I visited Whipple State Nature Preserve on Monday, April 13th. Route 247 was closed right at the entrance to the Twin Leaf Trail at the preserve. The easiest parking I've had when I visited Whipple. I wasn't worried about cars coming around that curve when I just pulled off to the side of the road. The Twin Leaf Trail at Whipple certainly lived up to its name. A very large population of twin leaf exists on several places along the trail. Dave Keener had told me that I would likely not see twin leaf flowering because they bloom in very early April, and I was there in the middle of the month. He was mostly right, but I did find some. The preserve is on Dolomite Cliffs just north of the Ohio River. The river was out of its banks at flood stage on the 13th of April, as you can see from this picture looking back down the Ohio River Valley. The wildflower display at Whipple was spectacular in mid-April. I found wild ginger flowering. The flower is usually below the leaf litter, so it's rarely seen. May apples were coming up but not flowering yet. The two-leaf plants have a flower at the fork. The bud can be seen here, while the single-leaf stems do not flower or fruit. Downy yellow violet was found on the dry ridge tops, which is the habitat of this wildflower. I should have paid more attention to the yellow violets down on the moist hillside. They may have been a different species, the smooth yellow violet. I also saw the Canada violet on the ridge tops and throughout the preserve. And common blue violets were also found, although I'm not positive of this identification. I should have spent more time recording the key characteristics and taking pictures of the leaves and stems of the violets. The Jack in the Pulpit leaves were present. Miterwort was growing in the crevice of a large Dolomite slumpbuck. That's the flower on the right side. Celandine was an unexpected flower for me along this trail at Whipple. This is a non-native member of the poppy family, and it looked like it might be crowding out some of the native species. Flowering around the celandine was the large flowered trillium, Ohio State wildflower. May have been in its peak bloom. One section of the trail, the hillside, had hundreds of these flowering. Celandine and Virginia bluebells gave this hillside beneath the Dolomite outcrop a particularly spectacular appearance. When Dave Keener suggested I may have missed twin leaf flowering, he certainly was right. You can see in this picture and the next one that the twin leaf had already flowered and was going to fruit. The fruit's very distinctive. It has two parts, just like the leaf is two parts. I was able to find a small patch still in bloom. The microenvironment condition must have led to a slightly later flowering for these plants. The 8-petaled flower doesn't last long after it opens. This particular flower was just beginning to open. It's right in the shade and the moisture provided by a rotting log. And the twin leaf flower beginning to open and then fully open. I also found what I thought was Dutchman's breeches. A closer examination, I realized that this was squirrel corn. The spurs of the flower are much shorter. They don't stick out nearly as far as they do in Dutchman's breeches. I should have looked closer at the other flowers of Dutchman's, what I thought were Dutchman's breeches. There may have been some on the hillside. The one that I took the picture of was squirrel corn. Back on the top of the ridge, it wasn't very green. It was relatively dry, and the leaf litter left a brown appearance. But when I turned just 90 degrees and looked the hillside, the forest floor was absolutely green with all of the spring wildflowers down in the moister hillside and valley below. I also found a sinkhole, which the description of Whipple says are found on top of the ridge. This was one of the sinkholes up on the ridge where the karst topography of the region is demonstrated. On my way back to Portsmouth, I stopped at Sandy Springs Cemetery. I had learned that John Lauer was buried there. His tombstone is on the right, and it's made of a sandstone that was quarried out of Rock Run and some of the other quarries in southern Adams and Scioto County. Two other tombstones of interest were George Rivers. There's quite a story about George Rivers, a Adams County Sheriff's detective, and his killing of a moonshiner back in the 1930s. In fact, he was put on trial for murdering the man. If you take a look at the Scioto Historical website, the full story is there. Another interesting grave marker at Sandy Springs is Jesse Waters, Mrs. Santa Claus, is buried there. This cemetery is also worth a stop because it's just full of prickly pear cactus. The sandy soil is evidently ideal for this cactus, which just has spread throughout the cemetery.